I think when I left off of the last story, our intrepid heroes had just gotten their hands on tacos and narrowly avoided getting arrested. Henderson is formally introduced to Carrie at this point, and I declined the offer to take over her character to get back in the game. I already had a character in mind, and the session was almost over at this point anyway. Henderson, being the responsible adult that he is, takes the kids to Harry's. "If you're old enough to kill cultists, you're good to drink," he told them, and grabbed everyone a beer. We got most of the way into an elaborate The Big Lebowski reference when Mike finally asked a question in a tone of voice that suggested irritation. "What the hell are you guys talking about?" "What? I mean, you guys are clearly having a laugh at my expense. I don't mind that, but I'm not getting the joke and it's pissing me off." "Dude, Henderson is basically the dude from The Big Lebowski. That can't be accidental." "It was. I've never seen the movie." "What? I've never seen The Big Lebowski? What the fuck do you mean you've never seen it?" "Not sure how that can be misinterpreted. I think my uncle mentioned liking it in passing once." The GM agreed to call it evening right there so we could work on the next part of the game while we dragged our fearless leader to watch what we thought was a fantastic movie. So at Harry's, they bump into my second to last character, Malcolm Reeves. Mal was a soldier who got discharged from the military after a tour of duty sent him into a nest of monsters. He was diagnosed with schizophrenic hallucinations caused by PTSD and sent home. He overhears Henderson talking about cultists and deformed hell poodles and asks if he can get involved. We moved out of the bar as evening begins to set in various degrees of drunk. We start with the building Henderson exploded. Nothing. Then we go back to the ruins of the church Henderson burned down. Nada. Same story with the old mansion and the cult meeting we saved Carrie from. "Fucking cultist," Henderson yelled dismayed. "Not one clue anywhere." "Maybe if you didn't burn everything down, we'd have more to work with," Mal suggests. "We wage a scorched earth sort of war here, kid," Henderson says darkly. "But that can wait until we get a lead. Anyone have any ideas?" Jimmy, buzz well on its way to wearing off, raises a hand. The internet? What the hell's the internet? And then Henderson learned something new about the world. Seeing as how Carrie and Jimmy's parents wouldn't want a trio of random dudes showing up to use their computers, they do the most next logical thing. Break into the library and use the public access lines. Sadly, Google had zero useful results under Gordon Poodle fucking cultist. Disciples of the Yellow King, as Jimmy pointed out and then corrected Henderson's spelling, had a list of locations and possible meeting times for various groups across the city. There were 10 unmolested locations, and several of them were having meetings this very night. Clearly the GM was wanting us to get back to investigating. Henderson instead brought enough gasoline to make about 50 Molotovs, and we burned every one of those motherfuckers down that evening, before dropping off the kids at home for a good night's sleep. Mal buys the first round as we watch the news, seeing our exploits all over TV. We all got a good laugh when the cops apparently failed their assorted checks, tests, and investigations. Since we players decided as a group that going to confront possible suspects meant having no fucking clue what's up, and we're gonna go arrest Jeff Bridges, Kevin Smith, and Marshall Mathers. Triumphantly, we return home for the evening, and we all catch the news the next morning. Apparently, people are appalled by the hate crimes against this one religious group in the community, and they send their prayers with them. The head of the local cultists thanked the community for their concern and said that he had the permission of the local government to gather together and pray for their souls of their departed in a local high school gym. In retrospect, the GM telling us that every living cultist of the store would be gathering into one convenient location should have been a hint that it was a trap. Like one big enough from visible from space. This is when Henderson had a cunning plan. He was going to go there and talk to the head cultist guy. I tell him that it's a fantastic plan, since Will already shared the summoning of the demon thing Henderson accidentally accomplished with them. So the new plan, which Henderson was only vaguely aware, was that Jimmy was going to help the deacon set up a slideshow thing for all of the words of the prayer that he was going to lead. Henderson asked what significance lawn gnomes had in their worship. The deacon, after deducing that he wasn't in fact being mocked, explained that the church was rather neutral on the topic of lawn gnomes. Henderson then kept chasing that line as hard as he could, asking about things like human-gnome relationships, whether the gnomes had souls, whether said souled gnomes could theoretically be used as sacrifices to Satan. The deacon then, and I'm quoting the GM here, in the only good line he had the entire game, gave Henderson a look that can only be summed up as, "Dude, I fucked a Shoggoth and you're creeping me out." Jimmy then led Henderson away from the fracas after he completed his secret mission of changing one of the slides about a third of the way into the show. That evening, the cultists prayed to his store. They asked for guidance and protection. They asked what their dead god be avenged. They asked that they be allowed to continue serving, or at least that was the intent. One of the slides had been changed to say something more like, "Al Cthulhu Fathagan Kilkili for al as iarakas faldepwa. One horrible tentacled monstrosity per member saying the prayers out loud. The GM assumed that we would crash the show. We chose instead to barricade the doors and leave. After the horrors had ripped apart the cultists, they turned on each other. Soon the hall was left with only the dead and dying, while some stone-cold motherfuckers shot pool across town. However, we didn't account for one thing. Hastur wasn't the only game in town, and a high priest of Cthulhu felt 100 monsters being called into the world in his master's name. He investigates and finds the scene of the crime, and then looks into the earlier summoning performed by Henderson. Gravely insulted by the turn of affairs, he uses a sympathetic binding using what little remained of the corpse to sick a pair of hellhounds on Henderson, before returning to his meditations. When they catch up to him, Will's already gone home, the kids are sleeping, and Henderson's going for a walk with Malcolm. We're in the park not far from his house, about to part ways, when we hear a horrible snarling noise. Pistols drawn, we get a lucky shot off and kill one of them while the second leaps onto Henderson's face. He throws it off and dodges its second coming. Guess who gets a crit to the fucking throat? Fucking guess. Yes, I'm still bitter that no character other than Simon survived across multiple sessions. So as the monster kills me, Henderson manages a few solid kicks into it. The summoner, having detected a kill from his beast, dismissed the survivor, assuming that he got the kill he desired. Henderson called the cops, and Mal was given a small but tasteful funeral at the military's expense. The official police reports read it off as mauling by some dogs that apparently escaped, heavily wounded. Their surviving party members raised a glass in his name, while you and I are going to diverge from the sad scene. That night on the way home, I had a terrible premonition. I now wonder, looking back, if this was the same fey mood that took Mike the evening he created Henderson. I looked forums. I googled strategies. I shared small snippets of my sob story online while I accumulated knowledge. Henderson was born of madness, and a man's hatred turned to blind antagonism. I, on the other hand, turned my eyes toward a magic more solid, practiced, dependable, evil. I delved into deliberate munchkinism for one express purpose, the creation of Simon Breckenridge, British spy. I knew setting out what I could never curb Henderson's madness. I could never hope to match it either. I therefore built Henderson's exact opposite. Competent, sane, cunning. His karmic balance. The yin to his yang. His fucking soulmate in plot annihilation. The perfect support character. When utilized properly, a well-made played support character is a fucking force multiplier for team effectiveness. Since Henderson was already wrecking the campaign harder than anything I could possibly design, I chose to co-opt Mike's efforts and make the Henderson situation exponentially worse. Waffle House millionaire. Simon was intentional. That explains so much. A self-cult nowhere. Man, I can't make shit up off the cuff like you can. Simon was like a week's effort. I skipped a couple of classes to perfect my technique. Switching away from the antics of Henderson for a little while, we take the action to London. Most spies who try James Bond level bullshit get killed. They get lost or abandoned by their own country. Most spies are not Simon Breckenridge. Due to careful manipulation of events behind the scenes, he managed to close multiple gaps in security, sleep with the most of attractive ladies in town, and pass all the blame to other people. He had a distinguished career behind him and retired at age 45 with enough embezzled government funds to have him tried for treason. Less than a week later, without a spy network in place, his country house is destroyed and he goes back to work trying to figure out who killed his wife. His one lead skips town in a boat, so he goes to America with only one goal in mind. Revenge. He knows that he'll have to use local conditions to his advantage since he's going in blinding without a penny to his name. After all, the Crown could hardly be caught funding a covert operation stateside. I track the yacht and find out where it intends to make landfall. I send a wire back home and discover that it's an influential member of a group known as the Disciples of the Yellow King. Looking around, it's not exactly hard to figure out why he might be interested in this town. Someone apparently declared war on his fucking religion. I decided that finding the group responsible for this would be a wise move, since the enemy of my enemy would make an excellent disposable asset for the given value of friend. Deciding to get up bright and early the next day to search it out, I retired to a pub near my quaint hotel room intending to sample the local fare. As I walk into Harry's pub, I'm greeted by a pair of people in the midst of a heated argument. I'm telling you, Will, this sort of degenerate activity is what's fucking wrong with this country today. You're fucking crazy, Henderson. Each generation has its thing. You guys had Woodstock. This is just the new thing. Come on. We all know those punks on the TV are talentless hacks. The real masters of the craft are dead and gone. I guess that's true enough, assuming you give proper credit to the proper men. Will, there's no fucking way in any universe that Tupac was better than Biggie. Let's get a second opinion, Will responds, before pointing at Simon. You there. New guy. Yes? Tupac or Biggie? For what, President? I'd rather vote for somebody with a sense of pizzazz. What's Liberace doing these days? Henderson smiles. I think I like this guy. Sup, Limey? What brings you across the pond? I'm a secret agent for the Crown. I came here to reenact a James Bond movie and get thrown out under an assumed name. Given your hilariously liberal gun laws, that should take most of my holiday. Which Bond? Connery, the only proper one. Simon notes, a hint of distaste in his voice. Nice. Henderson looks at the TV. Hey, they're talking about us again. Your church? Simon asks, taking mental notes. Victims of jihad, Will responds, taking a sip of beer. Demon-summoning cultist bastards. Stole my alms, too. Why do you reckon they did that anyway? Will asks, turning to his compatriot. Nearest I can guess, some sort of ritual sacrifice, Henderson responds. By the way, that taxidermist ever finished stuffing that poodle? I figured I can use him to keep away the kids on Halloween. Simon finishes his mental assessment. These morons will make for excellent cannon fodder. Gentlemen, a proposition. He then explains the yacht situation to the two of them while Henderson takes a call from Jimmy. He then laughs. Can you boys handle some parachutes and some speakers for a rock concert? I just had the best plan ever. What sort of plan is this? Will asks, watching Henderson intently. The best one ever. Come on, when have I ever lied to you? Refusing to explain further, he goes and leaves in his Buick to unknown destinations. Will lets out a sigh. I know where we can grab some speakers. You think you can get some parachutes? I think I can manage. We meet back up here tomorrow. So while we went off to do some very mundane things, Henderson went to the local Air Force base. He told the man at the gate that he was a veteran needing to see a doctor and then drove off to where the vehicles are kept. Since the GM had no idea how base security was supposed to work, he pretty much walked up to a cargo chopper, going through pre-flight checks and punched out the pilot. After hooking up the Buick, he flew across town to an abandoned warehouse and parked the chopper before going home. There really isn't anything more to that story. Apparently these were the worst MPs in the history of our armed forces. We all come back to the bar and Simon informs the group that the yacht will arrive in 2 days' time. Henderson and Jimmy rig up a thing that would let them control the various light charges and speakers from a cheap laptop, while Simon reacquainted himself with the controls of a helicopter. The theft and dropping of the yacht clearly happened at this point, so I'm not going to bother reposting that part of the tale here. My version wouldn't be nearly as funny as the way Mike wrote it anyway. Waffle House Millionaire. I totally expected more resistance. I planned that shit out like a Shadowrun-style attack, and then nothing happened. I just kinda walked in and jacked the chopper. Hilariously, I had no fly-a-chopper-related skills, even in the backstory. GM just assumed it was there, and I went. I fully expected to crash that thing in a field running from, the entire military. At this point in the game, having dropped off the yacht, we are under no illusions as to what was going to happen next. The GM gave up on the investigative undertones, and we gave up on the disguising of our war. I don't know why, but the GM refused to give us a cop-out. He didn't want to just rage quit and go rocks fall, everyone dies. The session ended with us dropping a yacht, and we all walked out of there fully expecting open warfare when we returned to the table. A week later, we meet up for the last time as a group after months of weekly games. It took Henderson about 3 weeks to completely destroy any semblance to a plot or long-term goal. All that mattered at this point was that our deaths were long, glorious, and brutal. Ironically, it was the first time we all arrived at the table with the same expectations and enthusiasm. Mike wanted to see Henderson die and the GM wanted to kill him. I wanted Simon to draw it out as long as possible. John wanted to see Will continue to give zero fucks. In a way, we all succeeded in our respective goals. The game picks up about 3 days later after the dropping of the yacht. The remaining cultists begin to kill each other in open warfare, and the police and federal investigators are all flipping their shit over the blatant wizardry happening. In the midst of it all, we're hitting high-priority targets and wreaking as much havoc as possible. The Buick is sacrificed as a car bomb to wipe out a police station filled with Shoggoths. We managed to briefly steal a tank from the National Guard and drive right through a bunch of zombies in a shopping mall. Henderson updates his outfit, swapping out the Hawaiian shirt for a leather jacket, the back of which is emblazoned with a gnome wearing aviators and throwing up the horns. He also dons a regular pair of gray cargo pants since he would have more pockets then. Simon put on a tuxedo and refused to take it off, while Will donned a Flogging Molly t-shirt and a utility kilt. Jimmy and Curry sadly couldn't update their costumes. Their players were pulled out of the game at this point by Jim's parents in the real world since they insisted on dragging them to some movie. We decided that meant Henderson made Jimmy get the hell out of Dodge, commanding him to continue the good fight if it came to that. We went back to the abandoned hockey stadium we were using as a base and loaded him up so he'd get out safe, and then dropped him near a military evac zone where he met his family. We raided an Applebee's to get some food supplies, and then hit up a hardware store along the way. On the way back, we found out that the bad guys have realized we're the cause of all their problems, and were about to launch a coordinated strike against us. They breached the military line between us and them and started to pour after us like a black sea of unthinkable horrors. Along the way, they start to reanimate the dead and dying of both sides to join their charge. We managed to stay half a step ahead of all the way back home, occasionally taking a detour through a place like an abandoned shopping mall or the home and garden center at Lowe's. We get back and then Henderson lifts up a gnome from the back of the truck. He smiles and then sets it back down before turning to us. "Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure." And with that, he made his way to the rink. We all know that it was the last stand scenario, and we started barricading the doors. We managed to get 3 of the 4 entrances almost unbeatable, but the 4th one was being broken open when Will and I got to it. Simon told him to go and make sure he took as many of them with him as he could, before walking into the mast to rejoin his wife. Will stole a Zamboni out of a storage and set of new high score while running over zombies and throwing ammo and such to Henderson. When he died, they were forced to go out over the machine he left to get onto the ice, while Henderson was waiting for them. He managed to kill a shitload of them, but when he saw they managed to get rid of Will's impromptu barricade, as if on cue, all 3 of the still locked entrances explode open when the horde of seemingly without number comes in. Henderson smiled, and called Hastur forward into the world and set the timers. As Hastur stepped forward, he got a rather unusual greeting. "O Canada, our home and native land. True patriot love in all thy sons command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free." The king in yellow pauses while Mike apparently hits the limit of the internal clock he's been ticking off in his head. "All right, we win." "What?" "The charges go off. I set them for 15 seconds. I needed to make sure he had enough time to arrive, but not enough time to actually arrive." "What?" He then broke it down and explained little pieces of information gleaned from investigative portions of the game. Meticulous notes from months prior. Together they painted a very obscure bit of information regarding the nature of the gods in this setting. But that's... "You bastard," the GM accused dramatically, standing up and pointing. "You only just now noticed?" Mike returned, politely baffled. The GM then performed the first and only table flip I've ever seen in my years of gaming before leaving in a huff. After a few moments of awkward silence, I realized that for all the bullshit, it wasn't really a satisfying ending. I'm not sure what drove me to do it, but I stood up, I picked up the table, and I moved to the now vacant GM seat. Henderson came to a few moments later, most of his body crushed in rubble. A few feet away, he notices another figure. "Sup?" he wheezes, while reaching into his coat with his one good arm, pulling out a joint he stashed away for future use. "I'm dying," the form replies, his voice weak. "I must commend you, human. I did not think you capable of such a task." "Yeah, you seem the type to know a lot. Something I learned early in life is that no one expects a sucker punch from someone they underestimate." He then lights his slip with a smile. "True," the form responds. "You know I've been following you. You know I never took your gnomes." "Fuck! Really? Well, now I feel like I might have overreacted a bit," he says with a cough. He then passes the blunt to Hastur, who after only a moment of hesitation accepts. "You apparently gave them up for a charity auction," he informs him. "You know I figured out everything but one little detail. Mind if I ask you a question?" "Shoot! Is Henderson your first or last name?" "Man, I've got no fucking idea." Laughing, the man and the mad god died together moments later. Henderson's body was dragged from the rubble 2 days afterwards, and only Jimmy and Carrie and some old preacher man cared enough to attend his funeral. Waffle House millionaire. To clarify in further detail, Henderson asked for them to not waste money on a corpse. His exact words were to just toss me in an old sack or something and send me to the dump. Ain't nobody gonna mourn me or give 2 shits I even lived. Jimmy opted to give him a rather nice coffin and pay for a decent funeral. Even if there was only the 2 of them there to mourn, it amounted to nothing. But I felt oddly touched that he felt obligated to make the gesture. Will was buried nearby since they were apparently friends in life and he didn't have much left in the world after his bar burnt down. Simon was quietly retrieved by his son and put to rest near his wife's grave a week later. Jimmy and Carrie managed to get into a nice college together since the insurance from Henderson's life and homeowners insurance policies, as well as the money coming in from liquidating Will's assets, gave them a nice head start in life. Their story didn't quite end there, but I'll let that shit slide for now since I know you guys only care about one epilogue. Henderson opened his eyes, fighting off a migraine God only knows how long later. He forces himself to his feet and squints around the blank desert horizon. He looks at the messes in the distance and the endless sands in every direction. Well, I'm either in hell or Utah. He lets out a deep sigh, realizing he's out of cigarettes. Utah, knowing my luck. He notices the town in the distance, and has no better idea on what to do next. He begins to wander in its direction. Man, that better not be a fucking mirage. A self-called nowhere. Alright, that's it then. The official final end of the Old Man Henderson story. This was a definitive version, since neither I nor Waffle House Millionaire have much more to expand on from there. There is more in store for our hero, but it's not really just his tale anymore. Sometime in the future, I'll tell the story of the game I will never top as a GM. It was a first in many ways for me. It was our first game system I designed. Admittedly, it was mostly just Deadlands modded to hell. It was the first full game I ran. It was the first campaign I named going into it. It was a game so successful and loved by my many players that every one of the main characters ended up getting their own spin-off campaign. So that's it for Henderson. But keep your eyes peeled for when I lay out the Kings of Nowhere. I'm not going to half-ass it like I did this one, since it's the campaign I feel that I need to do justice. As the story stepped forward, he got a rather unusual greeting. Oh, Canada, our home and native land. True patriot. I have no idea how to fucking sing this. True patriot and love all thy sons command.
Do you want to listen to it on YouTube or something?
No, it's okay. I'll just fucking say it.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land.